All right, everybody, welcome back. We are continuing on to Module 8.2, and now we're going to be starting to link animal behavior to concepts and theories that we explored in our first section, really understanding the relationship and really the complex relationship between evolution and animal behavior. So, just to review, an evolution states that traits that lead to increased survival and reproduction leave more offspring than do other organisms without those characteristics. So, in some advantageous characteristics that have some sort of genetic basis are going to be passed on to their offspring. So previously, we've discussed evolution sort of only in the realm of sort of phenotypic traits. So traits that had to do with physical appearance, for example, different beak shapes and the Galapagos Islands. But now we can actually start to think of evolution and behavior as being interlinked. So one characteristic that you might not think of as an evolutionary trait is birdsong. So, for example, female birdsong is very common in Australia. But as songbirds started to move north towards colder environments, their behavior changed, and songs started to die out. But that being said, several species came over to North America, and again had the propensity to have female birdsong. So this is an example of looking at the evolution of a specific behavior and how essentially it's behaving precisely as a physical trait um, might sorry, there was a fly coming in, as a physical trait might evolve and move throughout the world. So now we're starting to understand that something as complex as birdsong can actually perform in the same way as a physical trait might. Um, So in your reading, there were several examples talking about different behaviors and evolution. So I wanted to talk about the idea that a lot of different behavioral traits evolve because they have essentially a behavioral arms race. So the first example that I wanted to talk about is is in stickleback fish. So this is a very important experiment that conducted in behavioral ecology, talking about this concept called runaway selection. So initially, female sticklebacks had a propensity to select males that had a red underbelly. However, as the generations continued, uh, female female sticklebacks tended to be more and more attracted to deeper red and larger red patches on male sticklebacks. And because they were breeding preferentially with those sticklebacks that had more red coloration, uh, they in turn produced offspring that had this coloration, and again, it and not only for the male stickleback, but the female started to preferentially um, select sticklebacks that have this form of coloration. So what you have here is essentially the female and male um, uh, not species, female and male individuals feeding into each other for the selection of a particular trait. Another example of this might be of giraffes. So it's been hypothesized that the giraffe's long necks are actually evolved because of competition between males and females. Female giraffes would preferentially choose giraffes that had longer necks. And you can also see this in a great example is in Birds of Paradise, like I showed at the beginning of our last lecture, where you have sort of these elaborate mating displays, and they become more and more elaborate, and you have this sort of feedback loop happening between the female selection and the male traits. So again, that's called runaway selection. Another example that your book gave, that the reading gave, that is not necessarily behavior related, but is that prey animals, if they are larger, tend to survive longer. They tend to be able to escape predation. So an example of that might be moose, where you have this very, very large prey, what used to be and is still considered prey, but there are very few animals that can then actually take down a moose. However, that's not to say that predators are immune to these effects themselves, because again, you have species are interacting with one another. So you have the development of, again, these large apex predators, for example, wolves or killer whales. These are large predators that are responding to potentially larger prey. Additionally, you have the integration of specific behaviors, and so that's what this picture is here. You can see that wolves have evolved to be able to adapt to work together to bring down these larger prey. And likewise, the bison have specific defense mechanisms where they will surround weaker members of the herd to protect them against predation. So here we have, a few examples of specific behaviors, be it mate selection or this interaction between predator and prey. But we have these ultimately working behaviors that are ultimately related to evolution and natural selection. So another excellent example that your reading gave you was to look at the specific flight ability of cockroaches. So everyone here, I'm sure, has tried to step on or kill a cockroach, and they are exceptionally fast and exceptionally good at evading potential of being squashed. And that's actually a huge, that's something that's actually very important for cockroaches, the need to avoid larger animals and to avoid getting eaten by predators. So how are cockroaches able to move so quickly and detect where a predator is and where it should run? So cockroaches have evolved to have essentially these small hairs and the small appendages on the end of their abdomen, and these are called cercuses, which is from the Greek tail, and these are connected directly to the central nervous system of the cockroach. We have here basically when a puff of air blows across these hairs, it not only is able to immediately sense where that puff of air or movement is coming from, but also which direction then uh, that cockroach should run. And you can see that this is all direct. This large neuron complex is directly connected to the brain of the cockroach. So that's how a cockroach is able to evade and move so quickly from a potential predator or a potential danger. So now we're starting to think of and frame uh, evolutionary behavior in terms of these broad questions. So first we have the utility of, of this behavior. We know that this is likely likely due to being able to evade predators or evade dangers. And then secondly, we have the mechanism. We understand that we have this complex neural network um, that is going up to the brain and the central nervous system. And we can also start to think of this in terms of its development. So a cockroach, um, an adult cockroach and a juvenile cockroach actually behave in the same way. So it's not a learned behavior. This is something that is innate, and that all cockroaches are born with um, from their start in life. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and we'll continue on with this in this vein in the next lecture, where we're going to start thinking beyond sort of utility and development, and we're going to start again thinking about this what we can ask in terms of broader evolutionary questions. Okay, see you soon.